Hi, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to continue our discussion with mental illnesses and fiction by moving on with from addictions in general to substance abuses specifically. And then I'll probably make a couple more videos on this, maybe just one. We'll see how it goes on some of the specific types of substance abuses. But uh, so in this case, what we're talking about is, like I said in the last video, there's two big kind of groupings of addictions. There's the process addictions, which are just sort of behaviors we engage in, and then sort of the substance abuse, which are putting drugs or alcohol in our body, some sort of chemicals into our body. And I think that's probably the biggest way to kind of break them out. And then there's sort of like the eating disorder addictions, which are a little harder to classify, like with exercise. That's a process addiction, but then there's food, and can you be addicted to food because you need food to live? Anyway, so we'll get more into that when we talk about eating disorders in the future. So with substance abuse, the things that we have to consider with substance abuse is that we are intentionally putting a chemical into our body to change how we feel, to change our mood, to change how we think, but mainly how change how we feel. A few myths that I can think of with substance abuse. One is this notion of gateway drugs. While it is true that everybody starts with a particular drug, and there's no real evidence to show that they necessarily move on from that drug. There are lots and lots of people who I've met in my personal life and real life who are alcoholics, have always been alcoholics, since teenage years, and they've never even tried anything else. They have no interest in moving on to the next thing. Same thing with like weed. A lot of people will drink alcohol and smoke weed. They never do anything harder than that. People, because we're talking about chemicals that go into our body, we also have to talk about our bodies themselves. The chemical itself doesn't necessarily change. THC is THC is THC. Same thing with alcohol. Some people do this thing where they're like, oh, well, I don't drink hard liquor anymore. I just drink beer. Doesn't matter. The ethyl alcohol in the beer is exactly the same as it is in 20-year-old Scotch or some $500 bottle of wine. It doesn't matter. The ethyl alcohol is all the same. It's just the packaging that's a little bit different. And the packaging might react with your body differently, but as far as the alcohol goes, it's all about the same. But not everybody's body is the same. And so everybody reacts to different substances differently. I, for one, don't really like alcohol that much. I am not someone. I've never ever been that person who, when I drink, I get silly and I want to party and I want to go out and do more things and that sort of stuff. Really, after about 2 or 3 drinks, I'm done. I want to go home and go to bed. I'm tired. I used to also get really super depressed because alcohol is a depressant. I think because I've kind of got a grip on my depression, it doesn't seem to react that strongly anymore. But yeah, for me, alcohol was the end of the party, not the start of the party. I've never really done. Well, I've done some harder things. The only THC I've ever tried is in edibles, and all I remember some friends of mine bought some brownies or something from Colorado, and I ate some, and I just took like a 6-hour nap. I was like, well, this is a dumb drug. I didn't get anything still. Now, if I have trouble sleeping, it was probably great. But yeah, I pretty much just blew a whole Saturday afternoon because I was just sleeping the whole time. And then I still got 8 hours of sleep that night. So in that sense, it might have been good. It helped me sleep a little bit. But otherwise, yeah, I don't react to THC that well, that way. I also tried mushrooms. I actually have a book called Tales from the Mushroom, which is about my experiences working with psilocybin mushrooms. But even those are still very different. The idea for me of doing a little bit of mushrooms and listening to music or going to a party or something, I want to take a nap. For whatever reason, that's what drugs tend to do to me, is they tend to make me more sleepy. If I really had a drug of choice, it'd probably be caffeine, which is one of the more underrated drugs out there. Most people have a caffeine addiction; they don't even know it. And yes, you can be addicted, diagnosed with a caffeine addiction, even have caffeine withdrawals, according to the DSM manual. So all of that to say is that everybody's interaction with drugs are going to be different than everybody else's, and so it's not necessarily that clean cut. And because of that, treating people with substance abuse is kind of difficult because a lot of times you have to take into account their particular experience with substances. The reason why one person might drink a lot of alcohol is because it gets them going and it helps them party, and they can, they're a musician, and so they can perform, longer on stage and interact with more people and that sort of stuff. And then someone else might drink a lot of alcohol because it helps them pass out and lets them forget all the bad memories or reduce their anxiety or whatever else. So we have to take that into consideration. And some drugs seem to have a broader range of interactions than others. Like alcohol is definitely one. THC is definitely one. Meth is pretty much all the same. You do meth, you're going to get pretty much the same reaction. I think because it's just such a powerful drug, it kind of overwhelms your physiology. But related to that also means that, and I just alluded to it, everyone has like a drug of choice. They have that drug that, for whatever reason, just matches their personality very well, and God bless them, because that's something they're going to have to struggle with quite a bit. Especially if they bump into it. And that's like when we get into alcoholism, and I might talk about more about that later, but in this case, it's, I kind of put alcoholics into two big categories. There is one category which is, I always like to describe them as they have a physiological dependence or physiological weakness to alcohol. They literally can't drink just one. If they have one drink, they will have 20. They cannot control themselves. Once they get started, there's no point in even trying to get them to stop. And I always can tell that these are the clients that have this issue, is because they might get sober for a little while. I get a lot of clients that come in, they want to work on the sobriety. Finally, the addiction has gotten so bad that changing it seems easier than trying to maintain the life that they're doing. And so but with alcoholism, a lot of times what will happen is people get sober, and then after a few months, they'll decide, well, maybe I can introduce alcohol back in again. Maybe I can just drink a little bit. Maybe I can keep it under control this time. And sometimes they can. It depends on the person, depends on the situation, depends on a lot of things. But every once in a while I get this person who seems like they're doing great in their sobriety, and they say, you know what, I'm just going to have a beer this weekend with my friends just to see if I can do it. And then they can't. They go to a pool party, they have a beer, and then within hours they're right back to where they were again, drinking like they used to be. Usually not quite to that degree, but still, yeah, it shows that this notion of I can just have one doesn't work for those folks, and that's because they have a physiological need for the drug. Most people fit more into the category of the substance is doing something for them. They can control it. It's just they choose not to, or they don't know how, or they don't know if they even should. That sort of thing. But they don't have that physiological weakness. They are someone who could just have a beer with dinner, and then that would be it, and they never have another drink for another month or so. But for whatever reason, they don't do that. For usually a lot of reasons, they don't do that. So that's another big myth that a lot of people have, is that all drugs hit everybody the same way, which is not really true. Also the notion of like drug swapping. We hear about that sometimes. Oh, he'll just quit drinking, but he'll just get addicted to something else. There is, I think there is some argument for an addictive personality type, if you will. It's not like a personality disorder, but there are some people who are more prone to addictions than others. I've noticed some certain personality traits that come up. What are some of those? Like one is low frustration tolerance. These are folks who do not like being told no or to wait. They don't like the delayed gratification kind of thing. They want things to change, and they want things to change right now. And the hard part for me on the treatment end is that there's nothing that I can give a client. Meditation, exercise, yoga, talk therapy, hobbies, whatever. There's nothing out there that's going to be as fast, as powerful, and as guaranteed as substances. And so it makes it too easy to just run to that every time someone has a problem. And because they're so powerful and because they almost work all the time, people just keep going back to that over and over and over again, usually starting in high schools, sometimes middle school or college, but it's in that young stage. And so, drinking or drugging or whatever it is they're doing becomes their coping mechanism, and they see no reason to develop any other coping mechanisms. And so that's kind of my job as the clinician. Another factor that I noticed is risk taking. A lot of people who tend to abuse drugs and alcohol like to take risks in other areas of their life. This is particularly for the people who like stimulants. So they like cocaine, they like crack, they like meth, they like Adderall. If alcohol operates as a stimulant within their bodies, they'll do that as well. And those are the folks who they want to go out and try everything, and they usually have a lot of other stuff because they're usually taking risks in other parts of their lives. And so these are people who hop into bed with someone they barely know, or go run off, and they kind of live an exciting life on the outside, but a lot of times if it loses control, then their lives can fall apart pretty quickly, because you take risks. Well, sometimes those risks don't pan out, and there's consequences to those risks. And so that's the other thing that's kind of there. So when I have someone who has an addictive personality type, they're a little more likely to bop from one addiction to another. But that's not necessarily the case. And also, it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to bop from one substance to another. If I can detect that this is someone who likes taking risks, if this is someone who wants to live life to the fullest, or however it is that they like to describe this, then part of my job is to help guide them to healthier ways of getting their fix, their adrenaline junkie, that sort of thing. There are lots of healthy ways to take these kind of risks without jumping to drugs and alcohol, and then all the other stuff that kind of goes with that. I always half joking about skydiving, or finding that thing that you're kind of afraid of and go do that. That's the big risk, and that sort of thing. But otherwise, because everybody interacts with the substances kind of based upon their own unique physiology, it's not necessarily the case that they're going to jump from one substance to the next. Alcoholics do not turn into, potheads. Potheads do not turn into, heroin junkies. Heroin junkies do not turn into meth addicts. It's that sort of thing. Also with heroin, that's a big one that I've noticed too, is that most of my clients who are addicted or have been addicted to heroin, they don't want anything else. When they're younger, they might jump through all the different drugs. They might drink a lot, they might smoke weed, they might do various psychedelics, do some ecstasy, some shrooms, they might even do cocaine. They kind of do everything they can to change how they're feeling. And then one day they try heroin, and I've had a few recovered heroin addicts say, once they did that, everything else just went by the wayside. They have no interest in anything else. Weed bores them. Alcohol bores them. They don't like the feeling of cocaine. They don't even want it in their system. There seems to be something very different, and that's probably like a whole video in of itself about how opioids interact in the brain that hits people in a way that just can't really be replicated by any other drug. And so once you feel that, you never ever want to do something else. But even then, because this reminds me of a story, even then, that doesn't make someone an addict. Remember when I said about the substance abuse, is this is someone who is willingly putting substances into their body. When I was an intern, working to actually when I was still in grad school to become a counselor, I was working at a facility for adolescent girls who had been removed from the home. They were, I think, at least 11 years old and up to 18, but when they turned 18, they aged out, so they had to leave. But they were all in the foster care system because they'd all been removed from the home by CPS at some point. And there was one girl there whose mother would inject her with heroin, just a small dose of heroin, just to kind of knock her out. And then guys would pay the mother to come in and, abuse the daughter. You can use your imagination. And so she was basically pimping out her daughter like that. The girl, when I saw her at the facility, she was now 17. It had been years since she had been in the home. I think she actually had run away. And she was not a heroin addict. She liked to drink, she liked to smoke weed, but she had no interest in doing heroin. Even this super powerful drug that, when I was a kid, we were talking like, oh, if you do it once, you're hooked for life and you'll never get off it again. But she had that in her system. She had felt that feeling, but she didn't do it consciously. She didn't do it to herself. She didn't choose to do it. It wasn't working for her. It wasn't doing anything for her. And so therefore, she wasn't an addict. Again, that's the basis of addictions, is we are doing something to change how we think and feel. Well, she wasn't doing something was being done to her. And she wasn't trying to run from anything that she was thinking or feeling at the time. Afterwards she was, but that was more, like I said, drugs and weed and really just kind of running around with boys and stuff. And so yeah, just because someone does a drug or someone has it put in their body doesn't mean they're addicted for life or anything. Which I guess kind of gets into the sort of recreational use of substances. Yeah, you can recreationally use alcohol and weed. I think you can even recreationally use cocaine. I mean, I know so many people who they use it, but they don't like it. I've only really worked with one true cocaine addict, and he was a tough nut to crack. But pretty much all the others, it's kind of hard to use meth recreationally. It's kind of hard to use heroin recreationally. You might be using it. It might seem like you're using it recreationally for a little while, but that just may mean you're on that path to full-blown, out-of-control addiction. There are certain drugs, they're just too powerful to really do that with. Interestingly, psychedelics, particularly psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, mescal, or San Pedro, depending on how you want to call it, they will turn themselves off. They will, and that happened with me when I did my one of my big journeys. Was I was basically told by the mushrooms, is like, you're done, don't come back. We're not going to work for you anymore. This is it. And a lot of folks who do psychedelics have said that they oftentimes reach a point to where it feels like they've just sort of reached the end of that path and they have no interest in going. Psychedelics have some of the lowest addiction rates, I guess, out there. The most addictive is ketamine, which is ironic because that's the legal one. But even ketamine is not addictive anywhere near like, actually alcohol and tobacco. Those are some of the more addictive ones out there. But anyway, yeah, so I think next time I want to talk more specifically about some of these drugs. I kind of touched on a little bit this here, but I just kind of wanted to give an overview of substance abuse and kind of talk about some of the myths. As far as your writing goes, remember when it comes to addictions, you have to show at least or imply to the reader that the character is doing something. And then what I would really recommend is kind of doing a little bit of research on what it's like to be on these different drugs, and also what it's like to be coming down off of them as well. And then if you want to get into like the recovery, I guess it kind of depends on where your character is in the recovery process. But yeah, this is a behavior, so this is something you have to show. You can't just tell your audience, can't tell your reader, oh yeah, he's an alcoholic, and then never show him drink, and never show him drunk, never show him with a hangover, never show him with all of those sort of issues. If you just tell someone he's an alcoholic, you might as well say he's a plumber and he never ever works on a toilet or something. It's kind of like, why would you? There's not even point in putting it in there at that point. So anyway, but yeah, if you have any questions or comments, interest in other specific substance abuse or whatever, put them in the comments. I'll try and get around to them. Maybe I'll make a special video later on if I miss it or something. But anyway, I will talk to you later. Bye.